Hey folks, it's time to take a leap into the Urban Legends of Oblivion. So what does that mean? Well, it's looking at speculations fans have shared online over the last couple of decades, and also some other cool bits and pieces that I've come across on the way. Some of these have been explained, and I will mention that, while others remain a bit of a mystery. Some are just plain fun to consider, a bit wild and wacky like Oblivion itself. In the end, it's all part of the charm. So to start off, I think it's probably a good idea to cover the things that trigger urban legends in the first place. Mysterious hints, cut content, all that sort of thing. Oblivion has a wealth of such cut content that's caused speculation over the years, so to contextualise the stories we'll be sharing further on in the video, let's take a look at it all together. There's a lot of cut content in Oblivion. Originally, Bethesda intended for each city in the game to have its own arena, similar to the well-known arena in the Imperial City. The only two arenas that remain in the game, however, are the Imperial City Arena and the destroyed Kvatch Arena. According to writer Emil Pagliarulo, who confirmed this in a podcast commemorating Oblivion's 5th anniversary, the concept had to be scrapped due to an overwhelming amount of dialogue that couldn't fit on the disc. Each city was planned to have its own set of arena staff, including a gatekeeper, blade master, champion, and local visitors. While the battle matron character was exclusive to the Imperial City Arena, NPCs from the main arena were initially intended to be regular visitors to various city arenas, as their unused AI packages suggest. Additional markers, leftover scripts, and items related to the arenas, such as the unused Anvil Bloodworks chest and Leowin Bloodworks chest, still exist within the game files. Another really cool piece of cut content was the in-game holidays, similar to those seen in Daggerfall. Pete Hines mentioned that these holidays, along with horse armour, were among the first DLC planned for the game. However, these were ultimately scrapped, probably because of the mixed reception to the absolutely infamous horse armour DLC. Although Oblivion's files contain audio and dialogue lines hinting at holidays like Heart's Day and the New Life Festival, these were never implemented. Jester's Day was intended to be a holiday that would halve crime bounties, although the files lack any further specifics on what bonuses other holidays might have provided. The game also still contains traces of a Radiant quest system that was never fully realised. This system would have allowed NPCs in any town to initiate quests, but it was eventually dropped. Dialogue remains in the files, suggesting that quests would have had 3 possible scenarios: item retrieval, dungeon rescues, and treasure map sales. Several quests are only known today due to being mentioned in developer interviews. One questline would have allowed players to rise through the ranks of the nobility, eventually becoming the Duke of Colovia. Only fragments remain of this ambitious storyline, with Count Ormelius Goldwine and the nobility faction hinting at its existence. Along similar lines, a cut quest involving the character Talon Warhaft, an Imperial general from Arena, was mentioned by Michael Kirkbride. Oblivion also contains a number of quests clearly created for internal testing purposes. These include the Linda Carter quest, named after the actress who voiced female Nords and Orcs in the game. This test quest includes a line of dialogue: "This is Linda Carter," attached to a test NPC. Another test quest, known as Todd's Test Adventure, includes placeholder journal entries suggesting a journey through Todd's test house and Test Todd Forest, though these locations are inaccessible in the final game. An E3 demo quest remains in the files, which was designed to show off the early gameplay at E3 2005. However, most of the quest's references have been deleted or commented out, leaving only remnants of its stages. Something kinda cool is that a version of Kvatch used in the E3 demo still exists in the game files and can be accessed through console commands, although the quest itself can no longer be completed. Some quests with the same editor ID were pretty massively altered or overwritten. An early version of the Through a Nightmare Darkly quest in Bravo would have introduced Droshanji, and I apologise if I said that wrong, and a Daedra sighting with unused markers and dialogue suggesting this alternative plotline. Similar to that, the quest Lifting the Veil was originally going to involve an NPC named Lyra Rosentia in Bruma, before being reworked with Countess Narina Carvane as the Akaviri collector. Among other cut quests are unmarked miscellaneous activities in Coral, such as a possible quest from an NPC named Strantis. Rumours in Coral hint at shady dealings in the Oak and Crozier Inn, and at the strange behaviour of Hugo Billet, a sleeper agent of the mythic Dawn cult. Despite these rumours, these potential quest lines never fully materialise in the final game. In a similar vein, traces of a courier system in the Imperial City's market district remain unfinished. Dialogue for topics like "Do you need couriers?" still exist in the game files, but there aren't any associated NPCs to trigger the quest. Finally, some actual quests are still more or less complete within the game files despite not being fully realised. In Coral, an Imperial couple, Gerolin and Ariella Duran, were involved in a quest that would have seen Gerolin attempting to contact a group of ogres, believing them to be his long-lost kin. The quest, called Duran's Family Troubles, involves Gerolin leaving an offering at Spy Rock, only to be captured by the ogres and taken to Rock Bottom Caverns. Although the quest was ultimately cut, AI packages, scripts, and dialogue files for both Gerolin and Ariella remain in the construction set. In localized versions, Ariella has dialogue expressing her distress over Gerolin's disappearance, leaving a pretty interesting loose end hanging there. But for me, the absolute coolest piece of cut content of Oblivion is Sutch. So, what is it? Well, the city of Sutch was once an influential cultural hub right on Cyrodiil's Gold Coast near Hammerfell's border. For centuries, artists, thinkers and philosophers called it home, contributing to a vibrant community that was, at its peak, an intellectual magnet. Sutch's reach extended north towards what's now County Kvatch, with the Gold Road linking it to Anvil. Within its borders lay the intriguingly named Blood Dome Temple, though unfortunately we don't know much about this structure other than its fantastic name. Back in its heyday, the city was home to Baron Ignace, a figure known for his grand castle and its towering, seemingly impregnable walls. This fortress even inspired the tale of Ravius Terranus, a master thief who tried to swipe the Baron's coin collection, but failed, narrowly escaping thanks to the help of the Baroness Veronique. Interestingly, the tale Thief of Virtue places Sutch within Hammerfell, sparking questions about the city's true alignment. Was Sutch originally Hammerfell territory, or is this just a historical slip? The story also hints that the Thieves Guild has been dismantled over 4 centuries prior, though clearly branches of it carried on, casting doubt on the claim. In its golden age, Sutch had grown into a buzzing trade hub celebrated for its cultural influence. Figures like Joran the Skald King, in his younger days, travelled there to experience its vibrant arts scene, and the well-regarded scholar Thrastus of Elenir once visited its marketplace, noting an odd encounter with a hunter who'd captured a river troll. By this time, Sutch's significance was unmistakable, with 2 imposing towers visible behind Varen's wall as symbols of its size and status. But all of this changed dramatically. A vampire gang led by the infamous Belandris, Terror of the Weald, launched a brutal attack, devastating the population. Though Belandris was ultimately defeated, the city lay in ruins. And yet, Sutch's legacy lingered. Sailors still sang sea shanties originating there, especially popular during the Tiber Wars. Maps still marked Sutch's location, though closer to the time of Oblivion, it was no more than an abandoned ruin with only Fort Sutch Abbey left standing. This fort later became the base for a mercenary band led by Roderick, a warlord in failing health who eventually fell victim to the Dark Brotherhood's schemes. Fort Sutch itself faced another siege during the Oblivion Crisis, with Daedra pouring out of a nearby Oblivion Gate, though the Hero of Kvatch and the Imperial Legion managed to secure it. Visual remnants of Sutch and Fort Sutch from various periods show the town's rocky streets, its northern and western entrances, and homes nestled among the rugged terrain. Maps and sketches reveal early designs of Sutch, appearing in a removed map found in the game's files. Interestingly, some stray references to Sutch were left in the game, hinting at a city that almost was. Another curious detail: originally a chapel of Kinnereth was planned for Sutch. When the city was cut from the game, this chapel transformed into a nearby shrine, which incidentally left Kynareth as the only deity in Oblivion without a dedicated chapel. And if you've ever noticed the flat, sparse land around Fort Sutch, it's likely because the city was once meant to be there, shaping its surroundings before being written out of existence. So, having looked at that cut content, which is so tantalising, and seeing the hints left behind, you can see why there would be absolute tons of material in Oblivion that could get players thinking, theorising, wondering if there were uncovered secrets to discover. And it wasn't only the cut content that caused such speculations. Indeed, such was the nature of the game and its absolutely enormous amount of content that some things that truly did exist were thought of as rumours to begin with. Way back in the early 2000s, myths and rumours began to be posted online as soon as players set foot in Cyrodiil. Of course, not everything players spoke of had roots in reality. Many of the stories that circulated in forums and discussions were born of speculation, glitches, or simply a desire to find something more hidden within the world. Initially, players didn't believe that Oblivion had its own myths in the way that, for example, GTA San Andreas did, with stories like Bigfoot and Pigsy. Yet over time, several potential myths had begun to rise to the surface. Some, like the underfriked matron, the giant mud crab, and the giant slaughterfish, were thought to be false until players actually found them. In the end, these myths turned out not to be myths at all, but real, albeit rare, encounters. But this had the upshot of making anything players speculated on at least worth a discussion, since the early myths had been proven. Lots of other myths in Oblivion were often rooted in bugs or quirks of the game engine. One of the most persistent rumours early on revolved around a bug that could destroy your save files after several hundred hours of gameplay. It was a terrifying thought considering how much time the players were investing in the game. This myth, like the ones mentioned earlier, turned out to be grounded in reality. The glitch would corrupt save files after long playthroughs, and for a while it wasn't certain if it had been fixed. Though later updates, such as the Shivering Isles expansion and the unofficial patch, addressed the issue, this infamous A-bomb glitch, which caused animations to freeze after roughly 350 hours of gameplay, remains to this day in some form. Players can still reset the glitch with an external program, but it's one of those quirks that never fully disappeared. Then there were other myths that had absolutely no footing in reality, yet captivated players all the same. When the game was new, a host of rumours appeared, but they were eventually disproven with the release of the construction set, allowing players to look behind the curtain. One popular story involved fast travelling to Dive Rock, where, on a rare occasion, a member of the Kamona Tong would appear seemingly out of nowhere and walk off the cliff to their death. The myth promised that if this happened early in the game, the armour the NPC dropped would be unique, the best armour in the game. However, while players did observe the glitch where a Kamona Tong character would fall from Dive Rock, the armour was nothing special. Just another set of standard light armour without any remarkable qualities. Another persistent rumour involved a secret cave near Hermaeus Mora's shrine. Players claimed that if you completed all the Daedric quests and struck a certain rock with Volendrung, the entrance to the cave would be revealed, offering untold treasures. Countless players spent hours hitting rocks in the mountains hoping to unlock this hidden cache. But much like the Dive Rock myth, this was nothing more than a wild goose chase. No secret cave exists, and the story was likely just the work of trolls or misinformed players. So with all that being said, there are still mysteries and theories that continue to tantalise those exploring Cyrodiil. A great example of this is the abandoned house in Skingrad, known by many as Nerastarel's house, which has stirred imaginations for years. Walking into it feels like stepping into a forgotten corner of Cyrodiil's history. Creatures that are usually confined to dungeons roam freely within, while dust and decay tell tales of long neglect. For all the undead and unsettling atmosphere, there's no direct quest, no journal entry, and no NPC dialogue that explains why this place is such a dark anomaly. Players have, understandably, filled in the blanks with theories. One of the most common of these theories is that Nerastarel, its presumed owner, was a necromancer whose obsession with dark arts spiralled out of control. Some players speculate that he may have tried an experiment one that backfired terribly, resulting in his own demise and leaving his house filled with the walking dead. The absence of any clear lore or quest tie-in has led fans to suggest that this was once part of a cut storyline, one that could have fleshed out Skingrad's shadowy secrets. Was Nerastarel banished for dabbling too deeply in necromancy? Was he part of a hidden cult that left traces behind in his abandoned home? Others suggest that the house was meant to tie into the Thieves Guild, given that one of the guild's missions places the player nearby. Perhaps the house would have served as a safe haven for outcasts, or a dark meeting point for shady deals and secret rendezvous. Then there are those who see the house as Bethesda's playful nod to horror. The strange atmosphere and haunting emptiness could simply be there to shock players. The well in the backyard has also sparked speculation. Some players imagine it as an entrance to a forgotten tunnel or even a secret Dark Brotherhood sanctuary hidden beneath the house. In some versions of the theory, this well was meant to be an escape route for assassins or even a shortcut for Skingrad's most notorious necromancers to conduct their forbidden rites undisturbed. A few dedicated modders have taken this mystery and speculation into their own hands. In fan-made expansions like Oscuro's Oblivion Overhaul, new lore has been woven into the house's haunting story. Here, a powerful Altmer necromancer occupies the place wearing a unique robe of the Lich that Morrowind players would recognise. The modders have used the setting to add a challenging boss fight, bringing the mystery to life and providing the house with a dangerous guardian who rewards those brave enough to explore it. Ultimately, Nerastarel's house remains a complete enigma in the official game, a slice of potentially forgotten lore or abandoned development that lives on as a fan favourite when it comes to speculation and creativity in the modding community. Another spooky area that's made even spookier by Oblivion's glitches was reported by players: Tiber Septim's tomb. When the player enters the tomb, they encounter several wraiths. A potential glitch can cause the wraiths not to fall when defeated, leaving them floating in place, continuing to scream. This glitch can make exploring the tomb an even more unsettling experience, as the wraiths refuse to die properly and their screams echo endlessly. For our next legend, we're going to look at the player character. In typical Bethesda fashion, Oblivion begins with your character locked in prison. Although the game never directly explains the reason for your imprisonment, it drops some intriguing hints that suggest a darker backstory. One of the most compelling clues comes from a conversation in Skingrad with a Dunmer alchemist who reveals she fled Morrowind for unspecified reasons. During your chat with her, she asks about the fine for necrophilia in Cyrodiil, specifically mentioning repeat offenders. Without missing a beat, your character responds with at least 500 gold. This offhand remark implies a surprising familiarity with the law on necrophilia, knowledge that you likely wouldn't have unless you'd encountered the law firsthand. While this alone doesn't confirm that your character is guilty of this, it certainly raises questions. This theory deepens with the events in the Shivering Isles expansion, where the Hero of Kvatch eventually becomes Sheogorath, the Daedric Prince of Madness. The transformation occurs through a process known in Elder Scrolls lore as mantling, which involves embodying a god so completely that you assume their identity and power. The climax of this transformation, called the Enantiomorph, sees you battling Jiggalag, Sheogorath's alter ego, effectively becoming Sheogorath by defeating him. As Vivek explains in Elder Scrolls lore, the Enantiomorph is a conflict between two entities so alike that they are almost indistinguishable. This battle cements your role as Sheogorath, with Jiggalag addressing you as the Mad God by the end of the conflict. Throughout the Shivering Isles storyline, Sheogorath guides you towards this transformation, nudging you to embrace his madness by appointing you as Duke or Duchess of both Mania and Dementia, thereby strengthening your influence over the Isles. Haskell, Sheogorath's loyal servant, even implies that others have attempted to take on Sheogorath's mantle before, though they failed and became mere vestiges in the realm. However, to successfully become the Daedric Prince of Madness, one must already surely possess a level of insanity well beyond the norm. Since Sheogorath doesn't actively drive you mad throughout the storyline, it's reasonable to infer that your character was already somewhat unhinged before arriving in the Shivering Isles. This brings us back to the disturbing possibility introduced in Skingrad. For someone to repeatedly engage in necrophilia despite being caught and fined implies an extreme disregard for social norms and consequences, which would imply that the player character is already completely insane. It's possible then that the Hero of Kvatch's potential criminal history hints at true madness, one that makes the character an absolutely fitting candidate to mantle Sheogorath. Far from an ordinary hero, the champion of Cyrodiil may have had a much darker, more twisted past, aligning them perfectly with the madness required to become the Daedric Prince of Madness. For our next story, we're going to look at something that definitely does exist in the game, but has spawned theories and legends in its wake. The Deep Ones are mysterious subterranean beings worshipped by the inhabitants of Hackdirt, an isolated town in Cyrodiil's Great Forest. Revered as deities, the Deep Ones have inspired the townsfolk to construct the Chapel of the Brethren in their honour. The residents of Hackdirt, especially those most transformed by their devotion, are known as Brethren. These individuals live in the Hackdirt caverns closer to their gods. At night, the townspeople descend into the caverns for gatherings where they conduct rituals dedicated to the Deep Ones, using tunnels connecting each house to the caverns. Hackdirt's history with the Deep Ones began in the Third Era, when Urlav Moslin refounded the town as a mining settlement. During the excavation process, villagers stumbled upon a network of caverns beneath Hackdirt where they allegedly encountered the Deep Ones. Urlav claimed to have met with the chief of the Deep Ones, who imparted his language, runes, and ancient lore to the miners. The townsfolk recorded these teachings in the Bible of the Deep Ones, a text written in Daedric runes and drawn from the obscure work Ingasta Kvata Kvakis by the slowed necromancer Ingasta. In exchange for their devotion, the Deep Ones granted wealth to the townspeople, but their blessings came at a high price. The beings demanded blood sacrifices and other dark rituals, which eventually attracted the attention of the Imperial Legion. When soldiers arrived, they destroyed much of Hackdirt, killing many and scattering the Deep Ones, who have not returned since. Despite the absence of their gods, the people of Hackdirt continued to live above and below ground, keeping the faith passed down through generations. By the year 433 of the Third Era, around 30 years after the Legion's intervention, Urlav's grandson, Vlanhondor Moslin, attempted to bring the Deep Ones back through ritual sacrifice. To this end, the townsfolk captured Darma, an Argonian from Coral, intending to use her in their dark rituals. Their plan, however, was thwarted by the Hero of Kvatch, who rescued Darma and killed many of the Brethren in the process. Now, the only sign of the Deep One's lingering influence is a low, unsettling growl that echoes through the Hackdirt caverns. But what are the Deep Ones? Well, that's where the fans come in with speculations and theories. To start off, the quest involving the Deep Ones is believed to be inspired by the Shadow over Innsmouth by H.P. Lovecraft, where villagers worship aquatic, otherworldly creatures, also known as the Deep Ones. But the origins of the Deep Ones in Hackdirt are completely shrouded in mystery. Some fans suggest a connection to the Slode, a race of necromantic slug-like beings in the Elder Scrolls universe. Supporting this theory is the fact that Hackdirt's sacred text, the Bible of the Deep Ones, uses the Daedric runes and excerpts associated with the Slode necromancer Ingasta, as mentioned earlier. The Slode, who speak in an Esperant-esque language, have a dark reputation and a mastery over necromantic and teleportation magics, making it plausible that they could be linked to the Deep Ones. There are also aesthetic similarities. Like the residents in the Shadow over Innsmouth, Hackdirt's brethren, the townsfolk closest to the Deep Ones, have large fish-like eyes, suggesting a form of transformation or hybridization. This has led some to speculate that the townsfolk might be human Slode hybrids, potentially a desperate measure by the Slode to preserve their species after they were decimated by the All Flags Navy. Alternative theories propose that the Deep Ones could be a type of Daedric entity, or perhaps even remnants of Dwemer experiments, given the mysterious and subterranean nature of Hackdirt's caverns. However, there's no solid evidence linking them to the Dwemer. Other fans find the idea that the Deep Ones could be Falmer intriguing, although geographically this is unlikely given that Hackdirt is far from typical Falmer territory. All in all, the Deep Ones remain one of Oblivion's most tantalising mysteries that continues to spark speculation and fascination among fans. Next, we're going to look at a bit of an oddity in the White Gold Tower basement. Players have to enter this basement during a Thieves Guild quest to steal an Elder Scroll. This peculiar area contains oversized items, including a massive hourglass dubbed the Sands of Time, along with giant furniture and other strange clutter. This basement has led fans to speculate about its origin and purpose, as the furniture, although in an Imperial style, appears far too large for typical use. Some fans initially assumed that the oversized items might have been remnants of Iliad culture given the tower's Iliad origins. However, the Imperial design of the furniture doesn't align with Iliad aesthetics, and it seems unlikely that the Imperials would keep ancient relics of that scale hidden away in a basement. One theory suggests these items could be tied to a visit from a giant or an embassy of giants, possibly from Atmora. This idea is bolstered by references in the Elder Scrolls lore, such as a depiction of Tiber Septim or Talos meeting with the King of Atmora, who appears significantly larger than the typical human, resembling a giant. Others speculate that these items might belong to Sanguin, the Daedric Prince of Revelry, who supposedly spent time in the Imperial Palace with Riemann Cyrodiil. Given Sanguin's chaotic nature, it's conceivable that he might have left behind some trophies or oversized relics from his exploits. Additionally, comparisons have been drawn between the oversized objects in the basement and the similarly surreal furniture found in Arkved's tower during Vermina's Daedric quest, which could indicate Daedric influence or enchantments that warp the perception of time and space. A few fans have posited that the basement might simply be a storage area for relics too dangerous or mysterious to be displayed publicly, such as enchanted items that destabilize time and space. Some even suggest that these oversized items may appear and disappear in the basement due to the unique magical nature of the White Gold Tower, which is thought to be a powerful artifact in itself with influence over the fabric of reality. Another intriguing theory links the items to Mehrunes Dagon, the Daedric prince who attempted to conquer Tamriel during the Oblivion Crisis. Some fans interpret the presence of giant furnishings as symbols of Dagon's former influence, or even as artifacts from a time when Tamriel might have been part of his realm, as Mankar Cameron claims in his speeches. According to Cameron's view, Dagon sees Tamriel as his birthright and refers to the land as occupied lands that he intends to reclaim. This theory aligns with the notion that these oversized relics could serve as reminders of this forgotten era when Dagon or other powerful entities held sway over Mundus. In the end, though, the oversized items in the White Gold Tower basement remain an enigmatic part of Oblivion's lore. Their purpose is left ambiguous, which keeps everyone, as ever, guessing as to the true story behind them. The next story is very cool, starting with speculations and then growing from there, but I won't spoil it all right away. Let's get into it. The unmarked cave in Oblivion holds a certain allure for completionists, but exploring all its nooks and crannies isn't straightforward. This cave contains inaccessible sections, traps, and mysteries that hinted at an abandoned questline. One player, eager to tick every location off their list, recalled venturing through the cave with high acrobatics skills to jump up the holes in the cave's first section. But after reaching a dead end with a locked door, they were stumped by an immovable rock blocking the way back out. A forum user helpfully pulled information from the game's wiki at the time, shedding light on the mysterious design of Unmarked Cave. Apparently, it seemed this cave was likely intended for a quest that didn't make it into the final game. There's that inaccessible door that requires a unique key, one that simply doesn't exist, not even in the game's construction set. This locked door leads to the cave's deeper section, intriguingly named Unmarked Cave Mazeway. In another area, the Black Queen's Hall within the cave contains a chest marked Chest MS-25 Dungeon Mythic Enemy Rare 01 in the game's files, further evidence that it was meant for a quest that was ultimately cut. The chest itself, empty. The game also offers one rumour dialogue in Shadenhall. A character mentions the Red Queen drinks there, It was unclear at the time who the Red Queen was or if she connected to the Black Queen in Unmarked Cave, but this added to player speculation that these names could tie into an unfinished quest. For those at the time who were determined to explore the whole cave, a workaround was found. Players could start at the cave's exit using an acrobatics exploit to jump up the hole in the ceiling and work backwards, but even then, the locked door remained stubbornly sealed from both sides. Other players on the forum shared their struggles with the cave's rock wall, which sometimes blocked the way unpredictably. One player who didn't know about the exploit ended up stuck inside, having saved their game and thus losing a favourite character to the cave's unyielding design. Others reported that the rock wall's behaviour seemed to vary between attempts. Sometimes it moved, other times it was immovable, prompting players to re-enter and reload multiple times. But even after all that trouble, there was little to reward the effort beyond the satisfaction of having fully explored the cave. Anything there was simply a tease of what seemed to be a lost quest. But this wasn't enough for the Oblivion community who, as ever, dove headfirst into the mystery and not only came back with details but something even cooler than that. According to files discovered in the game, there was a planned quest titled Broken Promises. This quest could be initiated by speaking to an NPC named Strantis in Coral, who would ask the player to retrieve an heirloom from Holgerda. This request, however, would turn out to be a trap. When the player arrived at Broken Promises cave, Strantis would reveal his true intentions. He had tricked the player into the cave to kill them and take their belongings. After dealing with Strantis, the player would return to the Newlands Lodge to find Holgerda missing, leaving only a note. This note would direct the player to Unmarked Cave, where they would discover that Holgerda had been forced to work under the influence of another character known as the Black Queen, a necromancer and rival who had kidnapped Holgerda's family to coerce her cooperation. To free Holgerda and her family, the player would have to confront and defeat the Black Queen, along with her monstrous pet, a giant black Duzzorg, a creature similar to a Daedroth but larger and more dangerous. Though this quest was never completed for the final release, dedicated modders resurrected it via mods like Oblivion Uncut, allowing players to experience it in full. This whole story is exactly why I love these games and the community around them. It's a full circle story from rumours to investigations to literally resurrecting cut content for everyone to enjoy. Absolutely fantastic stuff. A smaller story that's quite amusing and sparked speculation is next on our list. A player explained online that back in 2006, GameStop listed an expansion pack titled Knights of the White Stallion. This of course led to speculation, but it turned out to be an error or mistranslation, likely referencing the Knights of the Nine expansion. However, a few fans expressed disappointment as they thought it would have been interesting if Oblivion had more quests with the Knights of the White Stallion and Leowin. I think it would have been cool as well, just goes to show how anything can stir up the imagination. This next story was more likely caused by a mod, however, it may have thrown up something that did exist or could have potentially existed in the base game. In a Reddit thread, a user shared their experience with some mysterious encounters. They described coming across a unique goblin assassin during a quest where they defended a farm from a goblin raid. This goblin assassin seemed to be a rare unrecorded enemy as the player could not replicate the encounter in later playthroughs. Another player suggested using the Oblivion construction set to search for the Goblin Assassin in the game's files, but the OP replied that they had already tried without success. So, is there a mysterious Goblin Assassin completely buried somewhere in Oblivion beyond the reach of data miners? It's almost certainly impossible, but it's still fun to consider. This next story, full disclosure, was caused by a mod, but I absolutely love the tale. So I wanted to share it with you as it fits into the campfire stories genre and was certainly discussed online amongst fans. A player recounted an unsettling experience while on a quest to gather evidence against Shadenhall's guard commander. Surprisingly, the quest indicator directed them to the abandoned house instead of Shadenhall Castle, specifically to the basement where the Dark Brotherhood Sanctuary is located. However, upon arrival, a new and unlisted location, the old recruitment tunnels, appeared on the map. With what they described as mounting dread, the player ventured inside. The tunnel started as a typical dimly lit corridor, but soon descended into total darkness, forcing the player to light a torch. The torch revealed a stationary skeleton just a few steps away, facing away from the player. With high-level stats, the player expected to defeat it easily, but the skeleton took no damage. Terrified, the player turned to leave, only to find the exit vanished. The skeleton attacked and killed the player in a single strike. Days later, the player installed a zombie apocalypse mod that allowed hordes of undead to infest Cyrodiil, starting with Cheydinhal. Determined to verify the old recruitment tunnel's existence, the player returned to the now zombie-overrun Cheydinhal, barricaded themselves inside the abandoned house, and re-entered the basement. Turning around, they were horrified to see dozens of zombies crammed into the small basement space ready to attack. The overwhelming mass of NPCs crashed the game, leaving the player with lingering questions. What were these mysterious tunnels? Who were they recruiting? And how did the zombies break through the barricades? The player concluded that the tunnels were likely part of an undocumented mod, though they never planned to enter the tunnels or revisit the abandoned house again. Now, there's elements here of the good old creepypasta genre that was all the rage back in the day, but I'm interested to know if anyone else ever encountered the old recruitment tunnels, and if so, what mod it came from. Moving back to player character speculations, in fan theory discussions, one user speculated that the player character might not actually exist prior to the start of the game. This theory suggests that your character, the prisoner, isn't simply a random inmate, but someone with a far more mysterious and divine origin. The theory posits that your character wasn't just imprisoned, but was created by the gods at the exact moment before Emperor Septim and his blades enter the cell. Essentially, your character only starts existing in that cell, meant as a signal to the Emperor of his approaching doom. There's some intriguing evidence that could back up this idea. For one, the blades are confused to find your character there, stating, "What's this prisoner doing here? This cell is supposed to be off limits." An odd reaction if you'd been a long-term resident. Additionally, in conversation, your character has the option to ask, "Why am I in jail?" A pretty odd question if you already know why you were imprisoned. The Emperor's answer, "Perhaps the gods have placed you here so that we may meet," only adds to the theory that your character's existence may be more divine intervention than personal history. Then there's the fact that your character can ask the Emperor, "Who are you?" which wouldn't make sense if they had prior knowledge of the world. Could this truly mean that your character is a sort of blank slate, an entity created solely to fulfill a role in Cyrodiil's turbulent fate? The original poster of the theory suggested that the character could be a Shezarine, an avatar of the Adric god Shor, also known as Lorkhan. This theory would explain why no one seems to recognise the character. There's no record of their past, and they lack any memory of who they are or how they ended up in their current predicament. Another user took this idea a step further by pointing out that the champion of Cyrodiil is sometimes seen as an aspect of Sheol-Gorath, and that perhaps at the start of the game, your character could be a fragment of Sheol-Gorath, split out of time and sent as a mortal to preserve the balance of power among the Daedra and thwart Mehrunes Dagon's invasion. This interpretation would mean that your entire journey in Oblivion and then later in Shivering Isles is actually a god's hidden plan to restore order. This discussion led to a more detailed exploration of Chim, C-H-I-M, one of the most mind-bending concepts in Elder Scrolls. A user described Chim as a realization that a character in Mundus, the world within the games, is actually fictional. In this moment, they understand that they don't truly exist as an independent entity. Many who reach this awareness simply cease to exist, their identity zero-summing and vanishing entirely. However, if they manage to acknowledge this and still retain their individuality, they achieve Chim, a state that grants godlike powers. Only two known figures, Vivek and Tiber Septim, are said to have achieved this state. So, what do you think after hearing this mind-bending speculation? Is the prisoner an empty vessel that only started existing when you booted up the game? Or perhaps even a piece of Sheol-Gorath himself before you even get to the Shivering Isles? Moving on to other speculations and weirdness, on a forum thread, players shared spooky encounters and unexplained glitches that left them unsettled. The original poster described an unsettling moment near Fort Rails. While exploring, they heard battle music suddenly start, and their sneak indicator turned yellow. Suddenly, a goblin materialised in front of them, only to vanish just as quickly. The player nervously wondered if they'd have to face more of these teleporting enemies. Another player recounted their own spooky experience with a Minotaur lord who teleported behind them unexpectedly near the Bloodworks. Attempting to improve their archery skills in a small corner, they were caught off guard as the beast seemingly appeared from nowhere and attacked, leaving them with no escape route. Enemies are scary enough without the power to teleport at will. Is this something that's ever happened to you in the game? Our next story takes us to Skingrad and involves an infamous NPC, Glarthir. So what's the speculation? Well, some players don't think he's as delusional as it might at first seem. The story begins simply enough. Upon arriving in Skingrad, players are approached by Glarthir, who furtively asks them to meet him behind the chapel at midnight, far from prying eyes. He believes he's being watched and insists there's a conspiracy against him. When players ask around, townsfolk are quick to dismiss his concerns, describing Glarthir as harmlessly mad. Captain Dion, a no-nonsense man, even steps in to warn players to avoid Glarthir. Yet the more one digs into the story, the harder it becomes to dismiss Glarthir's paranoia entirely. Glarthir's list of suspects is odd, yet oddly believable in the context of Skingrad's secretive nature. First there's Bernadette, a quiet local who spends hours each day in the chapel of Julianos. Her behaviour seems routine, but Glarthir is certain she's watching him. In his notes he mentions finding patches of disturbed earth around the vineyard, suspecting David, another supposed conspirator, of burying messages. Though the vineyard seems innocuous by day, the dirt mounds do add a strange note, suggesting hidden meetings or secret communiques, details the Mythic Dawn might use in their plotting. Then there's the enigmatic Valandris, a Julianos priest who some suspect may not be what he seems. One player recalls how Valandris, in an offhand remark, refers to himself as a primate, a title that they think feels a bit out of place in Cyrodiil. The players in the thread debate whether this could imply a link to the Maracati Selective, a fanatical sect known for their complex views on divinity and Aedra. For some players who speculated online, however, the most unsettling part of the quest is not Glarthir's paranoia, but the strange behaviour that seems to emerge around him. Some players recount that when they followed David or Bernadette, town guards or other NPCs would tail them, or in some cases frame them for minor crimes like theft. Subtle hints perhaps that there's more to Glarthir's story. Captain Dion himself seems implicated, often appearing conveniently to monitor players' actions or even, in some theories, serve as a direct enforcer of the Count's covert directives. Years after the game's release, players in online forums still pore over each detail, scouring the quest for overlooked clues, debating the motivations of Skingrad's townsfolk. Some now regard Glarthir's paranoia as perhaps more rational than they first thought, his suspicions fed by the guarded behaviour and cryptid responses of the townsfolk. In amongst this long-running debate about whether Glarthir was actually onto something or if he was just outright paranoid, some potential evidence was mentioned. While most players initially assume he's just a bit mad, after all he's creeping around corners convinced the whole town is out to get him, one player claimed they stumbled upon something that might validate his suspicions. A mysterious letter, some kind of proof hidden in one of the NPCs' homes, confirming that yes, people were keeping tabs on Glarthir. But there's a problem. Despite countless players retracing their steps across multiple playthroughs, this supposed letter remains elusive. The player swore up and down that they remember finding it years ago, buried in the Cyrodiil brothers' home or somewhere else in Skingrad, only for it to vanish on later runs. This has led to all sorts of theories, from it being an Easter egg exclusive to the original Xbox version to it being a kind of Mandela effect where people collectively remember something that never actually existed. Even years after the game's release, some players are still meticulously scouring Glarthir's suspects and scrutinising his rambling notes, hoping to find the one shred of evidence that he wasn't just another crazed NPC. So, was Glarthir right? Or is this just a fan-fueled wild goose chase? The The ambiguity has become part of the legend. Maybe we'll never know, but the mystery itself is enough to keep some players coming back. And on a completely different note, did you know that there's a beef conspiracy that has sparked a surprising amount of conversation among fans who are just starting to wonder, where exactly does Cyrodiil's beef come from? In the game, you'll run into all kinds of animals that logically source the meats on sale: sheep for mutton, deer for venison, boars for boar meat, and so on. But cows? There aren't any cows wandering around Cyrodiil, and yet beef somehow makes its way to the markets. Some fans have floated the idea that beef might actually be horse meat. After all, orcs get teased in the game for eating horses, so maybe they've found a way to pass it off as beef to the unsuspecting public. Then there's an even wilder theory. What if the beef is actually minotaur meat? Minotaurs are half-bull creatures you can encounter in the wilds, and one player pointed out that wild players can only harvest minotaur horns. Maybe NPCs are getting their hands on the rest. Sure, that all sounds a bit dramatic, but the mystery is oddly compelling. We're so used to seeing beef as a staple food source that the lack of cows in Cyrodiil really stands out once you notice it. So maybe it's nothing, but for anyone who's ever found a suspicious bit of beef on sale, it's fun to imagine that the people of Cyrodiil might be eating something a little unexpected. So there you have it, folks, another bunch of the weird, wonderful and wacky to set off your imagination. If you've got stories to share them below, and of course thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.